Yes, we are live.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of Caregiver Sati, I'd like to welcome all of you to our Caregiver story series. Today, we'll be talking to Vandana and learn more about her role as a caregiver and her also being a recipient of caregiving. And with that, Vandana, if you can give us an introduction of yourself and let everyone get to know you.
Sure. Thanks, Sudeshna, and I'm very happy to be on this platform. Like Sudeshna said, my name is Vandana Mahajan and I reside in Mumbai. I am a palliative care counselor. I work with cancer patients. I'm also associated with an NGO called Cope with Cancer, and I've been working with cancer patients for the last 6 years. Um, I have, actually, I'm a cancer survivor and now very recently a COVID survivor also. So I have been on both sides. I have been a patient who has been taken care of. And also I have been caring for the caregivers. So, and I very strongly feel that caregivers need a lot of support. And that's how I'm here talking to Sudeshna today.
You sound like you come with a lot of experience in the area of caregiving. Can you please tell us about your first, when you first began to play the role of a caregiver or you became a caregiver? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Sudeshna, it goes a long way back. Actually, my first exposure to caregiving was when I was a kid. My mother was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and I saw my father taking care of her. And that's when the seed of caregiving probably, kind of got planted in my mind. That somewhere down the line, I would also want to be supporting a caregiver because I realized my father did not have much support. Um, a couple of years down the line, it was my father who was the primary caregiver to my mother, landed up being a patient. And my dad was diagnosed with adult muscular dystrophy when he was 50 years of age. And it was a progressive disease and he was dependent. And as the disease progressed, he became totally dependent on my mother. And nearly for about 18 years, it was my mother solely taking care of my father. Those 18 years of her life, I was married, but whenever I went home and I saw her taking care of dad, I realized the stress that she was under. She stopped doing everything else. She had nowhere to turn to. She had no support. It was solely her responsibility to take care of Papa. Um, I remember very vividly when I would go meet them after my marriage and I would tell them, Mama, let's go out somewhere. She would be petrified because Papa had started taking falls and she wouldn't want to leave him at all. And at times she would cry out of frustration, out of desperation, because for 20 years straight, that's what she did without any break. It was for her, like she says now, that's all she did for 20 years. Wake up in the morning, start taking care of Papa, and that's how her day ended. And that's when I again realized that how important it is for the caregiver to have support. Probably as a daughter, she did not turn to me as much because a mother would definitely not reach out and complain. That's what I felt. But there were times when I would find her crying because she had her own health issues, and somewhere that got lost in the entire act of caregiving. And it was tough to take care of Papa because as the disease progressed, he was on a walker, and moving around was a task for him. She would be standing, keeping a watch when he would go to the washroom. So that's how petrified and scared she would be. And Suddenly, there would be times when Papa would just fall backward. He would fall backwards, and it was left to her to take care of him at that time. Though my brother was also there as a secondary caregiver, maybe, but the onus of taking care of Papa was on her. And like I said, there was no support. And when Papa passed away, her it was like the dam. She had reached a saturation point, and she cried and she cried because although she had lost her spouse, but also it was tears of tiredness, tears of of years of frustration, of not being able to express her 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 anguish, her angst with anyone. So I think the exposure to the need for caregiver support started from there.
Sounds like your mother went through a very long and a very challenging time caregiving for your father. And you, as a daughter, would be there occasionally to check in on them and just meet with them. What were some of your initial lessons learned, or what did you feel were some of the things you would keep in mind down the road when you started becoming a caregiver?
Like I said, whenever I would go home, it was like mom would take a break.
Hmm.
She would take a break. So it was a respite for her. I would do my bit in taking care of Papa. So that's when I realized how important it is for the caregiver to share. There is no sharing of the burden for the caregiver. So the lesson that I learned was when caregiving does come to you, your loved ones are extremely important. But it is also very important to know that each one of us has our limit. And beyond that, if we, when we reach that saturation point, it's important to reach out for help, take a break, and share the load with someone. So that's the first lesson that I learned. The second that I learned was accepting that you can't do any more. Because I think as a caregiver to your loved one, you never want to fail. You take it upon yourself that you have to do it. And that causes a breakdown in many of the caregivers. So that acceptance that I can't do anymore is also very important. And also, it is important to express it to the person who's being cared for by you. Because till you express it, that person also doesn't know. And a caregiver, is taken for granted. So these are the two things that I picked up in my experience with seeing my mother and father go through this journey. And like you said, it was a very tumultuous experience for everyone because with mom having arthritis, with papa with muscular dystrophy, so things seemed very disheartening. And like we have caregiver Sati now. At that time, it's been 10 years since Papa passed away. That time there were no institutions like this where I could connect my mom so that she could seek some counseling or maybe just offload the feelings that she was carrying. So that's what I learned and what I saw and perceived being a caregiver, not a caregiver, I would say being a silent spectator to everything because I did pitch in with my bit, but which was very tiny, which was very small because I visited them say once in 6 months, and so that hardly qualifies for pitching in. So yeah, so that's my experience with them.
So then, moving on, you became, I believe, a caregiver to your father-in-law for some period of time. So what were some of the important things you kept in mind or you were able to implement uh, by learning from your mother's caregiving role? to you becoming a caregiver for your father-in-law?
Yeah. So my father-in-law led a very dignified life. He lived, he was 85 when he passed away. So he was keeping unwell. He had come visiting us, and he had a heart issue, and his oxygen levels had started dropping. He reached out to me somehow at that point in his life. He and I developed a very special bond. He started trusting me. So he told me, "You are the one who's going to take care of my medicines, and you're the one who's going to fill up my medicine boxes." That trust was there. And one day his condition deteriorated and he had to be admitted. My husband, my mother in law were also there. And he was admitted, and it was a shock to the entire family because he was mobile, but when he got admitted, after a couple of hours when we went in to check on him, he was in the ICU. And to see someone you love in the ICU is extremely heartbreaking. He was intubated, because his oxygen levels had dropped. And I remember going to the ICU and I holding his hand and telling him, "Dad, have you decided to go?" And my heart kind of broke because, you know, that's the message that we got from the doctor, that probably he will not make it. For a son, for my husband to see his father like that was traumatic. And I thought of myself when I would see my dad going through all that. So I pitched in. I told him, let's not a burden. I wouldn't call it a burden. So I told him, let's share the responsibilities. So he would say, I want to be in the hospital the entire time. I would always tell him that let's share. You be there for half of the time. I'll take on the responsibility, the other half. That gave him some respite because, being the son and being the primary caregiver for him, and being the father being in that state, he was answerable to a lot of people. The decisions that would be taken, whether the decisions were right or wrong. So he was under a lot of stress. So we shared the responsibility, and that helped him and the family to deal with the situation much better. And I remember when dad wasn't responding, and my husband was home that day, and I went and spoke to the doctor, and I asked him, Doctor, what are the chances of dad being revived? Doctor said, I don't think Vandana is going to come back. So at that moment, for the family, as caregivers, to take that very important call of prolonging his agony, so that we could physically have him with us there, or giving him the choice to leave with dignity, fell on us as a family. So my husband, I, and my mother-in-law, we sat together and we discussed it, and that's when we decided we would tell the doctor that it's time to go. I realized it was tough for Karan, to my husband, to do that. I said I would do it because, like I said, I realized my mother had nobody to share her burden with or her responsibilities with. I went to the doctor and I told him that we would want dad to go with dignity. Kindly take him off life support. So, as a caregiver, it's emotionally very daunting, very traumatic to make such decisions. But I would say it is important to also to take these decisions because it's important for our peace of mind and also for the person whom you are caring for. Though in retrospect, at times we do feel, both me and my husband, we do feel, did we do the right thing? Maybe he could have come out of it. So that little bit of, I would say, guilt, that guilt we still hold. And you have been a caregiver, Sudeshna, so you would relate to it. Maybe if we had not told the doctor to take him off. Maybe he would still be alive. And that, I think, as caregivers, stays with us. And I would say it's important to talk about it, so that because I think guilt is debilitating. It is debilitating. It brings you down. And as I speak of this, I feel I feel those tears in my eyes. But I think as caregivers, we should reach out to experts. We should reach out for help and express what we are holding in our hearts. Because sometimes they stay with us lifelong, and we are not we are unable to let go of these feelings like guilt, or maybe, I think, primarily guilt, I would say.
You've been extremely brave, and I mean, extremely brave to take on the responsibility of leading taking charge of your father-in-law's caregiving, and even helping take some of the tough decisions. And as a child, of my parents for whom I had to take some medical decisions, I can somewhat relate to it because there's a very fine line between maintaining the comfort and dignity of the patient and extending their life, um, which may or may not add any quality to either them or to you. It's a very fine line. So knowing and learning when to let go is something the doctors actually helped me also figure out. I still remember in my father's case, the doctor would say, Sudeshna, it's time to let go. You just don't know when to give up because, like you said, the guilt keeps haunting you at times. What if I have not done enough? What if I could have done some more? But all you can do is, I mean, from what the doctors told me was, all you can do is try your best, and there will always be some lingering guilt, and you have to find a way to reconcile with those at some point of time. It's tough to live guilt free in these kind of situations. At least that's the way I felt. But it's a very courageous task that you have taken upon yourself.
I also would like to add here, Sudeshna, I had never seen my father-in-law sit for a day. So, I get goosebumps when I think of it. He was a man who led a very dignified life. And to see him as in a vegetative state in the ICU, somehow for me and Karan, was extremely heartbreaking. Letting go of a parent is very tough. We don't want our parents to go ever, never ever. We may turn 100 years, we would still want them to be there. And I remember the first time I had walked him and I held his hand and I told him, I think, Dad, it's time to go. And my heart still sinks. It just goes to the toes of my feet. But we've also got to remember that when we have geriatric patients, or maybe we're taking care of them, the dignity of to die um, peacefully, or with the death has to be with dignity, and we have to give them the right. We can't hold on to them for our selfish reasons. So I think probably that helped us to let go. So at times, honestly, Karan and I sometimes still, sit and talk about it. He says maybe the doctor wasn't correct. Maybe we should have consulted another doctor. Maybe we shouldn't have done that. But at that moment, we felt a man who led such a dignified life. As his caregivers, it was our responsibility, and also as a mark of respect for that man, to let him go with dignity. My heart's going tuck 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 tuck, and my
These are never easy situations. These are always some of the most difficult situations, and it's very difficult, especially for people who have to call the shots. Uh,
very very difficult.
and however, you handled it very bravely and very. I totally admire the way you handled it. moving on, a few years later, you yourself became the recipient of caregiving.
That's
Can
right.
you please tell us more about that?
Um, so, yeah, so I have seen caregiving from both sides, I would say. About 12 years back, I was diagnosed with cancer, and I was 36 years of age that time. And I mean, I would say I was young that time. And suddenly our world fell apart. And my husband was serving in the army that time, and the onus of taking care of me fell on him totally. It was a very tough journey. I went through a lot of complications. Any which ways, cancer is not a easy disease to deal with. For 6 years, we struggled, and at that time, probably I did not realize what Karan had gone through because I was so caught up in wanting to stay alive. I did not feel the struggles or the probably the difficulties he faced as a primary caregiver. But now, I've been a patient for 12 years now, and he never expressed it to me what he felt, what he went through. But now, when I probe a little, and I express my compassion, I said, I know what you've never been able to express it. So that's when he says, Vandu, it's been so tough. I had to make such difficult decisions, and I always would tell myself, what if I took a wrong decisions? I would have your family to answer to. I would have my family to answer to, and our daughter, who was very young, who was just 10 years of age that time. So I have seen him struggle. Even now when I was admitted for COVID, being there for me, doing his job, taking care of the family responsibilities while I was admitted, ensuring that our daughter never felt that mama was admitted, speaking to my parents and reassuring them that don't worry, your daughter's going to be fine, telling my in-laws not to worry, must have been such a huge emotional drain on him. And like he says, that even in the hospitals, there was no one, I mean, to tell him, to speak to him. While I went through all my surgeries, there was no one in the hospital to sit next to him, hold his hand, and ask him, how are you feeling? What do you feel? Your wife is going through so much. And that has probably stayed in his heart. He's been carrying it. And this time when I got admitted for COVID, I realized that the man has suffered. He's suffered a lot. And I so wish that there was a means in which he could share his pain of caregiving and also his frustrations and exasperation. It's not easy to live with a person who is, I wouldn't say I'm terminally ill, but I live with chronic illnesses, and it's draining emotionally for a person to live with you know uh, with a partner or a spouse or anyone in the family who deals with chronic illnesses. There are so many visits to the doctors, so many to the hospital. There is a complication happening so often. And he has to be the pillar of support for me. He's the one that I turn to always. So, like this time when I came out of COVID and we had to maintain that social distance, I stood 6 feet away from him and I cried, and I told him, "Tu hai to, I'll be all right." I sang that song, and he looked at me and he said, "You're all that I have." And it's not been easy for him, Sudeshna. He will probably not see it because, somehow in our society, the man is supposed to be something, whatever. But I realize the struggles he's been through, and the amount of responsibilities that lie on his shoulders. um, I have started prodding him, probing him. And he does let go of that control sometimes. Like I told him, I'm going to be talking about this today. He said, yeah, that's very important. People should know what a caregiver goes through too. So it's not easy at all being a caregiver to a person who suffers from a chronic illness. And I certainly wish, and I would strive to be a part of a network which provides support for caregivers like that. Because as children, we do take care of our parents. The parents are in that stage when we know that inevitability of death is going to happen. But when you're dealing with young chronic patients, and you have a whole lot of responsibilities around you that need to be fulfilled, I think it's a bigger burden on the caregiver.
Looks like your husband has had his share of caregiving responsibilities to fulfill, and he has also done a tremendous job of it, given what you have been through medically. And one thing that you were talking about is when you were undergoing treatment, there was nobody there to be there with him to just stand by him and say, look, everything will be okay. Again, that is a gap, where we as caregivers have to try and fill up. Because caregivers also need a lot of not just logistical support, but emotional support also. And before we end, I would like to know what would be a couple of key messages you would like to send out to those who are currently caregivers, and what would be some of your messages to them or well wishers of caregivers?
So before I move on to that, something in the lighter vein, I would like to share how Karan would, kind of offload or express his the angst, or maybe if he wanted to vent. I remember when my first surgery happened and I suffered voice damage, and the doctor told him that your wife may never speak again.
Oh,
So when I came out of surgery and I croaked. So he told everybody in the family that was the sweetest croak I had ever heard in my life. So that was one of his ways to express his anguish. And another which I want to share with everyone is how caregivers express, and probably we don't realize that they have been through their set of trauma. When I underwent a surgery 2 years back, he looked at me and said, "Don't worry, your body weight is going to be maintained. You're losing organs one by one."
oh my goodness.
So that was another way he expressed probably his fears, or maybe his way to pacify me. So that's what I wanted to share with
Finding
everyone.
humor in stressful situations like these always helps you.
Absolutely.
And I
So,
believe it's meditation and humor. These two things can take you a long way.
oh, they do. Humor, I think humor when you're faced with challenges like these is tremendous healer. It's a big healer. So yeah, so that's what I wanted to share. And also, like you said, what is the message that I would want to give out? I am presently, like I had mentioned, I am a counselor to cancer patients, and I deal with a lot of palliative patients. In addition to caring for the patients, I also care for the caregivers. And I stress upon the need that caregivers should also be counseled, because a healthy caregiver, a mentally, emotionally caregiver, is much more able to take care of a terminally ill patient. So my message would be to everyone who's struggling out there with any kind of, it is a struggle. It's, for the sake of the society. I have also, when I counsel patients, I have come across caregivers who say, ye to hamari responsibility hai. And then there are young caregivers who say, our life is being inhibited. We want to grow, but because of being taking care, we are stuck in a place. So to all caregivers out there, do reach out. We have a platform like Caregiver Sati. um, Share your burden. because sharing sometimes helps you offload and helps you move ahead with a clearer mind and a lighter heart. And do not hesitate. Nobody is going to judge you. Nobody is going to make any impressions about you. We all come with our limitations. We all come with our we are no one of us is perfect. And it's okay to accept that we can falter, we can make mistakes, and it's also okay to accept that we need to be healed too. So that's my message to all the caregivers out there. Reach out to us, reach out to Caregiver Sati. We are there, each one of us on Caregiver Sati is there to help you, because a healthy you definitely would make the person being cared for uh, happy.
You had an amazing journey, Vandana, in such a short span of time, and you've been through a lot, both you, your husband, and it is an inspiration to not just me, but I'm sure to everybody else who is watching this live. And I definitely, on behalf of Caregivers, Santi, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your um, um, key takeaways. I mean, it's
And
something that we will all keep in mind going forward.
I also want to add in, Sudeshna, that though my daughter was very young when cancer happened to me, but she's also been through her little ways. She's also been my caregiver. So I am very grateful to her also for being there. And also, I've realized that being a daughter, young daughter, taking care of your mother and seeing your mother almost die is very traumatic for the kids also. So to the families where there are little children, being a part of the caregiving system, do reach out to support systems, because kids also need to heal.
I look forward to Caregivers Sati growing nationwide and becoming a very robust support system for all the caregivers. It is definitely a cause many of us believe in, especially those of us who've been through this. And whatever little we can do to spread its awareness and would be, hopefully it will help all the other future caregivers down the road.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you so much for having me here and giving me the platform for sharing my journey. Sharing is caring, and it can, help so many break their inhibitions about wanting to reach out for help.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Vandana, and thanks to Caregiver Sati platform for giving us the opportunity to be able to share our experiences of caregiving. With that, wishing all of you a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day ahead. Bye bye.